Good morning. I'm not Chris. My name is Keith Niger, and I'm one of the elders here, and we're so glad to have you here today. Welcome, welcome. I want to introduce a friend of mine. This is Chris Wilson, and he'll be sharing his unforgettable story this morning.
Good morning, y'all.
You can go ahead and clap.
Okay.
I learned many years ago, if you're one of the cool kids, your name is going to be Chris, okay? So legally, I'm trying to change my name to Chris. But Chris Wilson, Chris and I met, I guess the first time was at Hope Water, and it's one of the ministries that our church provides on Monday where we provide showers for the homeless. And Chris was there that first day, and, you know, he and I started talking, and I mean, just clicked and just really enjoyed meeting him. And I felt like, you know, kind of a long lost brother there. And then Janet and I were doing something else. And then Chris Crutchley and Chris were talking. And Chris shared his story with Crutchley. And Crutchley said, you go ahead. So you should.
Yeah, I got about 5 words into it. And he's like, "You're the one I've been looking for." I was like, okay. So yeah, but I am Chris Wilson, and this is my first time doing this, so please bear with me.
Yeah. So Chris has an incredible story, and the scripture is, he who has ears to hear, let them hear. So I pray that you'll hear what God would be saying through Chris. So Chris, tell us a little bit about yourself, early life, where you grew up, mother, father, siblings. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Flint, Michigan. I grew up with a single mother. My father was in and out of my life, and then have my 2 sisters. Erica is 5 years older than me, and my other sister is about 10 years older than me. So, and now I've been in Savannah for about 15, almost 20 years now, and currently I have found my calling, and I'm working for the Homeless Authority, Chatham Savannah Authority for the Homeless. So.
And it's an incredible story as you come, as you hear his story full circle, how God brought him to this point of the job he has and what God's been doing in his life, in hearing his story. So, Chris, what was your childhood like, and what was that environment like growing up?
Flint, Michigan is kind of the only word I can really use to describe it is desolate. You know, most people know it for the lead water crisis, but honestly, Flint has been in shambles long before then, and from my understanding, continues to be. So my father is an extreme alcoholic, and so that left my mother. My mother and father filed for divorce while she was pregnant with me, and for the first 5 years of my life, I remember him more like a sibling than a father. He would kind of come in, pour himself on the floor drunk most nights around midnight, and then, but yeah, I definitely didn't understand the role a father was supposed to play in a child's life at that point, which led my mother to kind of pick up the slack. You know, she had worked as a bus driver tirelessly for 25 years. She retired making $5.25 an hour, would never receive any government assistance, but never complained one time about it. But at times I kind of grew up as an only child because my sister, who was 10 years older than me, you know, she was pretty much heading out of the house as I was coming into life. And then my other sister, Erica, was on a pretty defiant path, you know, self-destructive path, really. So she wasn't there very much, and then went to stay with my father after a little bit of time. But
and because of that, your mom would pick up extra shifts, and she would leave, I think you said, early in the morning.
Yeah. She had top seniority over all the bus drivers, so she would take all the field trips to make ends meet, and that left her she'd leave at 4:30 in the morning to go to work, and then get home most nights around 9, and then some weekend field trips too, depending on sporting events. So yeah, I grew up definitely taking care of myself from the start, doing my own laundry, getting myself up, going to school, cooking for myself, and which was good, honestly. My mother could not cook, but no, she burned the kitchen down trying to cook a Pop-Tart one time. So, so true story. So, but yeah, for the good and the bad that came along with it, I ended up left to my own devices more than a child should. And then following my sister too. My sister Erica, unfortunately, was a huge influence on the first start of my life. You know, like I said, she was on a defiant path, but so I kind of followed her on it. I think partially to make sure she was okay, and then the other part was to because there seemed to be a freedom in her defiance. She didn't care what anyone thought. So that kind of led me into some dark places following her sometimes as well.
So talk about a little bit about those formative years of your life with your mother pretty much unfortunately being gone because of work and the situation she was placed in. So she wasn't around much, and your dad with his drinking and was absent in your life. And then this older sister had a big influence, and just kind of growing up, what impact did that have on your life with your sister's choices and then, just those early years?
Yeah, it definitely. My father was in and out for the most part, and every time he came in, it seemed to be quite a terrible event with him as well. But my sister would like throw a party and didn't want me to tell on her. So like the first time she had me smoke marijuana, I was like 7. And then also simultaneously, my dad would come pick me up for the weekend, and like Christmas Eve one year, he picked me up, and always drunk. He always drank and drive with me, and just didn't turn on a curb one night and went down the embankment and hit the telephone pole and sent me through the windshield. He got a boat a few years later. He did end up getting his life together pretty good. So he was able to, get a house and and my stepmother, I believe, found it. And I feel the need to kind of defend my father as well, too, because I never saw my dad sober once in the 32 years I had him. But when he died, he did find Christ the last year and a half of his life, and he was sober thanks to my stepmom. So it's a blessing. I'm sad I didn't get to see it in person, but we did speak on the phone quite a bit. So he was the nicest man. He loved me. He wasn't a bad father. He was just a slave to his addictions and, fighting his own demons, unfortunately. But either way, I never understood the role of what a father should have been in a child's life growing up. But that also kind of created a backdoor for me, too. I hated alcohol. I despised whatever everything about it. So it kind of led me to thinking that addiction only pertained to alcohol, unfortunately. So I didn't realize that addiction pertained to much, much more. But, I would learn that later on in life. So, and then my sister introduced me to cocaine at the age of 10 in a hotel room one night with her boyfriend. And I remember wondering why anybody would ever do that after the feeling, before the effects took place. And, I didn't start using at that point, but it definitely opened a door for addiction into my life that led me down a dark road.
I was a therapist for a lot of years before my retirement, and there's a word called a parentified child. It's where the child kind of becomes the parent. The child has adult responsibilities, has adult thoughts, and certainly, experimenting with marijuana at 6 and cocaine at 10, and worrying about your dad and the drinking and your mom being absent, doing laundry, cooking. You are the poster child for the parentified child, and so no real childhood in your life, I guess.
No, the kid in me had to die away pretty early, and what I couldn't fake, I feigned. So because I ended up probably around 9 or 10 when my dad finally did manage to get a stable house and a stepmom. I would not go to bed at night because I was worried where he was, if he would show up alive. Or if he'd kill somebody else, which almost happened on a couple occasions, like with a couple on prom night, unfortunately. Usually you hear about the prom kids drinking and driving. Unfortunately, my dad ran them off the road. And the embankments in Michigan, like to go into a ditch in Michigan is not like in Savannah. They're like 20-foot ravines. So he showed up muddy in tuxedos. I have all these memories that it was definitely a role reversal for me where I was worried about my dad for that part. So
Chris, share a little bit about your behavior and how that began to change as well, in your early years and your relationship with your mom, how your behaviors impacted that, and just kind of share a little bit about that.
Yeah, I definitely developed some behavioral issues, and to the point where my mom didn't really know what to do with me pretty early on. Shoplifting, which really wasn't that uncommon around Flint. Or like I had terrible luck as a kid too. Like one time I threw a smoke bomb into a car. All of us did. Like it was somebody's turn. We threw a smoke bomb in, it just like smoked up the car and we'd laugh. Well, not me. So I went to the gas station and got the smoke bombs. And when I threw it in, it landed in the fabric of the seats and got so hot it caught the truck on fire. The guy owned a lawn care company and had just filled all 6 gas cans in the bed of the truck. To put it in perspective, it was the second or third car away from the house, and when it blew up, it still caught the house on fire. So, yeah, that was not at all what we were going for. So I ran home terrified, and then also, unfortunately, we were on the Explorer program, which is like a Boy Scouts for the fire department. So they thought we had started the fire on purpose to go respond to the call, which also didn't look good. So my mom pretty much said that I had to get out. Like she kicked me out after that. She didn't know what to do with me. So I became homeless at that point, and worked. This was the summer before I turned 12. So I was under a bridge that the train tracks went over in a town called Fenton, and I have to also explain that I was already 6'3" at this point. I had hit 6'3" at like 10 or 11, so I always tried my best to make my demeanor match my size. So I went to McDonald's and got the job, and until it came time for payday, about 2 weeks later, and there's no Social Security. They kept asking me about my Social Security card and all this, and so they found out I was lying. And I had been talking to my cousin throughout that part too. And he said, well, why don't you just come up here? He had gotten away from Flint, Michigan, too, and moved up about 300 miles north of Flint to a town called Johannesburg. And so I moved up there with him and decided to just kind of hit the reset button on my life. I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew I didn't want to be sleeping under the train tracks anymore. So, and to put it in perspective, for 3 surrounding counties, kindergarten through 12th grade, there was 150 kids. So, and that's exactly how isolated I wanted to be from the world. So, I tried to join school. Turned out I couldn't. I needed my mom's permission for that. So, I called my mother. She tried to use this as a bargaining chip to get me back home. She wouldn't sign off on me going to school up there. So, turned out what she was doing, she could actually go to jail for not letting me go to school. So she ended up signing off and emancipating me right before I turned 12, so I could get myself into school. And I did, and I got a job at Glenn's Market, bagging groceries, and went to school every day. I made that happen for about a year, but it was small, it was country, the kids were cruel, honestly, to somebody who wasn't from there. They all knew each other. So I made it about a year before I decided I called my mom and I said I wanted to come back home. And I did. So, but we quickly realized that I couldn't. She was trying to regain control over me that she never had in the first place. The behavioral issues came right back. I did well up north, but when I came back, the behavioral issues came right back along with it. I think I was just angry for a lot of reasons. So she even tried boarding up my windows. She couldn't keep me in the house. I sawed off the nails and put Velcro on the back of the boards. Like I was just determined. So I ended up moving out. I think a lot for her peace of mind, like because she was stressed out about it. So I moved out and then found hardcore drugs for the first time on my own. I would say it led me into some pretty rough places of town, and I was introduced to crack cocaine. And I started smoking crack at the age of 13. So that persisted till, I would say, about the end of my freshman year. I didn't attend one day of school my freshman year. So I was too busy, in active addiction. But I realized I couldn't go on like that. But I was isolated. I wanted better for myself. I really did. So I decided to get my stuff together, and I went to an alternative high school in Flint called Atlantis, which it was above an Insight Recovery Center. And I tried to put down the drugs, which I did, and I managed to make up for lost time. And I graduated on time. I graduated valedictorian. I was on my yearbook, and I had gotten a full ride scholarship to Baker College in Flint. So unfortunately, the alternative school I went to didn't really prepare their kid. They didn't really have the means to prepare their kids. The school didn't even exist a year after I graduated. But so I was ill prepared for my college career, and I quickly lost the scholarship. And I remember just feeling stupid for even having tried.
But Chris, I think it's important. There are kernels of who you are in those situations. You didn't give up. You graduated valedictorian. I mean, so there were glimpses of who God created you to be in the midst of, this tumultuous life that most of us can't even imagine. And that's a theme, I think, as you continue to share that same theme of who God created you to be. And so you went to Baker, and that didn't work out after a year. What next?
Yeah, I do. Also, his protection over me too, because I'm skimming through a lot of situations that I shouldn't have survived, like at all. Like I was exhibiting some pretty reckless behavior, and I was just lost. But I had never, not once, was I introduced to Jesus or religion, or as many people. I can't remember anyone in our neighborhood really going to church. So at that point, I relapsed again, and I went back to what I knew. Using drugs, and but quickly realized that wasn't for me. You know what I mean? If I just had to be a worker for the rest of my life, I could at least do better than what I was giving myself. So I knew I had to get out of Flint.
And at this point, I'm sorry for interrupting, but
No, you're fine.
you were still holding to that unwritten rule in your own mind, but I'm not going to drink.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Still hated alcohol. Absolutely. Still hated alcohol.
Yeah.
And looking back, I'm not even sure if I viewed myself as an addict, honestly.
Because you weren't drinking.
Because I wasn't drinking, and it wasn't what had taken my life from me. You know what I mean?
Right.
I never once had seen my dad sober, but so I moved 45 minutes away to White Lake, Michigan, and was running a pizzeria named Hungry Howie's. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of Hungry Howie's, but I still to this day will give them shameless plugs as often as possible. Flavor crust, garlic, butter, cheese. No. So I became a store manager for them. I was still using pretty heavily when I went down there. I didn't know how to stop, but I knew how to remove myself from the situation. So it's still amazing to me that I was given the opportunity to even run somebody's business. But I went and worked for the Petersons. And I cleaned up. It gave me a sense of purpose. And I had about 3 years sober under my belt after I went to work for them. I was 18 at this point. But looking back now, I can see I still didn't have a foundation of Christ. You know what I mean? There was always that one piece I was missing that allowed me to fall back, and I now know that to be Christ. So about 3 years later, me and my friend Leah, who was my assistant manager, we were going to get matching tattoos, which seemed perfectly legit at the time. Decided I'm going to date myself here as well, because we stopped in at a Bennigan's. I don't know. They don't exist anymore. Yeah, they definitely don't. And you could still smoke in there. She said she reached down for a cigarette, and when she came up, I was on the ground. I had already died. And by the grace of God, as only God could orchestrate, I was back to back with paramedics on their lunch breaks. Still took them almost 8 minutes to get a pulse back. And then the only medevac in Lower Michigan had just landed like 15 minutes ago. And then they flew me to Ann Arbor, Michigan's University Hospital. Within an hour of the incident, I was already under the best doctors at the University of Michigan's hospital. So it'd be a long time before I found out exactly what happened. They kept me in like a medically induced coma and flew in the Boston Scientific Medical Team and decided to put in a defibrillator in my chest. So they prepared my mom. They said, it's not going to be your son. With the amount of time he was with that oxygen, he's not going to be your son when he wakes up.
And you were in the coma for how long?
A month and a half. So, so basically, the way they say it is like when your brain dries up, it creates all these lesions. And when I came back, they healed over the course of the year, so let me just say when I wake up, because most of it's just what I'm told, but when I woke up, I just remember, this is one memory I did have, my mom's face looking over me out, and I was like, who died? It was the first thing out of my mouth. I was like, who died? Because no mother should ever have to wear that face. And she's like, well, you did, honey. And I'm like, no, seriously, who died? Like, so that's about my only memory. I kept repeating myself, like 10-second Tom off of 51st Dates, and it was pretty embarrassing. So I ended up getting out of the hospital a few months later after that. And I would say so it turned out I had what they called Brugada syndrome. And so it's a backflow of one of your arteries that causes like spontaneous cardiac infarction. Yeah, I learned a lot of words. I still don't know what they mean during that period. But don't get me wrong, even though I had 3 years sober, I absolutely attribute this to the heavy drug use that I had done from such an early age. So to this day, I know that to be true. So a few months went by in life. I was able to go back to work, I'd say, probably about 3 months after that. And Leah called me and she was like, can we go get those tattoos? I was like, honey, we can go. You can pick them out. I was like, you've earned it. Because every time she looked at me, I only had seen her twice. And when I saw her, she looked like she saw a ghost. I just absolutely shocked her. Felt terrible. So that's where the hourglass on my arm came from. But on the way down there, she told me that the Petersons were screaming in her face, I want to know what drugs you were on. And just like, and I also had found out that my family had drug tested me several times, not believing that it was nothing stronger than marijuana in my system. So that really devastated me. Even though I had 3 years under my belt sober, it made me feel like I was just going to be an addict to them, no matter how much work I put into it. And it didn't then, but I believe it created another hole in my heart that allowed me to relapse further, not too further down the road, unfortunately. So, but I shrugged it off, and I went back to work for the Petersons for a little bit. But my friend Melanice, who I went to Atlantis with, her mother had just passed of cancer. Even through school, she was always telling me about this Tibby Island, and I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about with this Tibby Island. But her grandparents had bought a condo down there in the 50s, and her mom came down here to pass, and now she wanted to come down to be with her dad, and she asked if I would move with her. And I was like, yeah, please get me out of here. Like, I just didn't want Flint, Michigan to be the last place that I saw before I died. So it took a little while. I had to wait on my last check, but I moved down here with her to what I now know to be Tybee Island. And it was unlike anything I had ever seen. I didn't even know a place like this existed. I have to admit, I probably take it for granted now. But when I first moved here, it was paradise to me, and it quickly became home. I thought it was going to be a glorified vacation, but it became home quickly. And I made friends, and I only stayed with Mel for like a week or two. I've never had problems making friends, so got a place on Wilmington Island, moved in with somebody, and then it was St. Patrick's Day weekend. Yeah, it was the one where the power went out. I don't know if anybody remembers that. It was like for like the 3 days, power went out for like counties. So it was unlike anything I had ever seen, you know what I mean? And I didn't even hesitate. I just started drinking immediately. I didn't even...
So the one thing you vowed, at least I'm not going to drink.
Right.
You go to St. Patrick's Day.
And without a thought. I mean, it was unlike anything I'd ever seen. And I probably didn't have another conscious thought for about a year after that. So unfortunately that... The party scene just made everything seem so glamorous. Plus the beach too, you know what I mean? I had never really been around the ocean like that before, and it was always it's always a party until it's not, unfortunately. But I still saw Savannah thriving economically, and I knew I could build a life for myself here, and I knew I wanted to be a part of it. So I started doing construction, and then 2014, I started my own LLC, my own construction company, which was thriving. I had repeat business. I was doing amazing, but still drinking. You know what I mean? Everyone was drinking. So, and I remember thinking, I was like, it's probably about a year later. I was like, I get it. I understand how my father ended up I saw the beginning of it, instead of the end. That was my life. That was my hell as a child. So, and then I also remember thinking, this is in my genes. Like I was very good at drinking. Like it came so naturally to me. And my grandfather and my grandmother died of cirrhosis of the liver. It's in my bloodline, like my entire bloodline. So, yeah, at that point, alcohol found its way into my lunch breaks. I found myself having to go to a bar for lunch, and then I found it made its way back to the job site with me, which wasn't unheard of for even that was socially acceptable in the construction world. So it created another back door that led me to drinking a few fifths a day. Yeah, like insane, and still driving home. Looking back, once again, God had his hands on me because I made it through all that with no DUIs, no accidents. I never hurt nobody, and I very, very easily could have. So, but I had my condo, and my business was thriving, and I was happy. But unfortunately, like I'm not sure where it started. I noticed friends went to the bathroom every once in a while, and then they started letting me know that they were doing cocaine again, and the difference being, instead of the slums of Flint, at this time it was people making six figures a year that made it look glamorous and like it was fun, and it was, you know what I mean, like almost like a high school, like trying to impress the cool kids kind of thing, but like I didn't know where my addiction would take me very quickly. So I fell off pretty quickly after that. The alcohol the drinking social scene fell to the wayside because it's difficult to do cocaine on the beach, honestly. You know what I mean? Like, and I didn't want them to know what I was doing. So I quickly found myself retreating, and then, but maintaining, but the alcohol fell by the wayside. I pretty much quit drinking at that point, and then the cocaine had taken place, so, which brought in a whole different caliber of people in my life at that point. One friend in particular, Eric, come to find out that he had supplied drugs for the Southeast Coast, for what I now know to be crystal methamphetamine. I didn't have any desire to do it, so I didn't see any trouble in letting him use in my apartment. But I invited the devil into my home at that point, and he made himself comfortable. So I made it probably about a couple months before I tried it, and then that was it. The first time I did, it was unlike anything I had ever felt before or since, honestly. And the backslide happened so quick. Looking back, I don't understand how I couldn't see what was happening at the time. But I mean, it's just my life was gone. My life was gone. I quit working. I completely isolated myself. All my friends had pulled back. I think they knew something was going on, but like I said, I was really good at being private and keeping myself guarded. So I let my condo go before I lost it because I had a good relationship with my landlord. And then I tried to maintain a couple other apartments, but I wasn't working. There was something about this drug that had paralyzed me, and my inability to work just wasn't there. So eventually I lost that, and it just became me and my Jeep Wrangler and the few belongings I managed to hold on to.
You lived in your car initially then?
Yeah, pretty much. And then this is kind of where jail started for me, too. So it was, I looked back at my arrest record to give the testimony, so I know this to be 2019. So things started to get better and worse at that point. It's indescribable, the feeling when a cell door shuts and closes on you, on a human being, and you know that you have no control over your life, and it was instantly traumatizing for me because I wasn't built for it. I just had fallen into drugs and whatnot, but I was in denial. I was like, I shouldn't be in here. I think it's a common occurrence. Nobody thinks they should be in there. So, but it was good. I think God had to isolate me in order for me to be able to hear from him, because at this point I still had never been introduced to Jesus or anything at this part. So my first time in jail, I was given a daily bread, and the excerpt was from Job in that particular story about how his friends came to sit with him at his worst moment and just sat in silence with him or job. I'm sorry, it was job to me at the time because I didn't have anyone. I was all alone. I will say the first 3 years, it was just me, the Holy Spirit, and the Bible. I didn't have anyone to go over anything. And honestly, I think it was a beautiful way to come to Christ, honestly. Now, don't get me wrong. I was getting out of jail and going back to, humans revert to what's comfortable, and I'd get out and I literally was, I'm sure most of you in this room had drove by me on Eisenhower exit going down the parkway, and I was in the ditch just angry, and I looking at the cars passing by, and I didn't want to be a part of that world that I struggled. I was just so tired of the struggle.
And you lived there in the ditch or for a long time.
About a year and a half, almost 2 years. Yep. I was there in between jail visits. Yeah. So, going back the next time, what God did was he put that spark of curiosity in me with the daily bread that first time, because I got out pretty quickly after that. I was able to get bail at that point. So the next time I remember trying to get a Bible, and I got a hold of it, and I sat there and just wept reading the story of Job. And, mine was more, in my eyes, it was self-inflicted, all of the troubles that had come upon me, and Job's definitely wasn't. But I could just relate to so much of that story, because I didn't know God, but also that led me to not blaming God either. You know what I mean? I don't understand why a lot of us do. We create the mess that we're stuck in by not turning to him. And then when it goes wrong, we're like, why, God? Like, it just didn't make sense to me. So then I began to just really I started leading prayer circles. I had a lot more stories that I dove into first. Like, I really loved the Old Testament, but Paul spoke out to me, and also the Gospels. I started to realize that all of these characters were characters. You know what I mean? None of them were perfect when Jesus found them, or when they came. God uses the broken to help turn pain into power. And that's exactly. I still didn't realize that's what he was doing for me at the time, because I didn't feel worthy of it. The more I learned about it, and my history and I didn't think that it was something that could be offered to me, honestly.
And in your narrative, Chris, if I remember right, you began learning more and more about God, but it was through your incarcerations. It was through your prison. You were in 11 times, I think you said?
Between 2019 and 2023, I had been arrested 11 times, yes. Yeah. Some short, some long. But it was the only way he could isolate me for me to be able to hear from him and introduce himself to me, honestly. Yeah. So I started praying. I kept falling in love with the word and just having, and then I remember he's so patient too, because I remember like taking the Bible, one of my last few incarcerations, and going back into the ditch on drugs, reading the Bible, until unfortunately the last time in between incarcerations I had tried, because we always do, okay, we'll do this, but I'm never going to do crystal meth. I'll do crystal meth, but I'd never do this, or I'll never do that. I had reached the end of my road, and I had actually started using drugs intravenously. Only for about a month. I think God was like, enough. Like, it only went on for about a month. And he plucked me out and put me in jail for something I didn't do. The case was thrown out eventually, but that last incarceration was exactly, because every time I'm like, I shouldn't even be in here, I was like, but you are. What are you going to do with it? So I had already been leading prayer circles, and plus it was so embarrassing because everyone's like, Chris, you're back. The last time I got out in March, and I was back in jail in May. Like, it was like, and they're like, what are you doing? And I was like, I don't know, but I got my Bible. So, and I kept my spirits up, and it was incredible. So that time, I had this whole speech going before the judge. I was like, look, I've only been offered punishment, never treatment. I can't go on like this. I got to say exactly none of it. I walked in, and I watched an entire courtroom orchestrate in my behalf, and I saw the cogs turn, and I was put in rehab, which is what I was trying to get to anyways. So I was taken, also because there are things like, I had to go to the heart doctor. So to go out in the world in my jumpsuit and handcuffs, like that feeling I don't ever want again. Like I had literally, this old couple got up and ran out of the cardiologist, like ran from me like I was a murderer. And it was just like, it was one of those moments I'll never forget. And then also getting out and being taken to the rehab in handcuffs too. I just Jesus literally took the chains off me that day. I knew that that was the last time I was ever going to feel the iron on my skin, the clink on my, and I still got kicked out of the rehab. It wasn't perfect, you know what I mean? And then I was like, what do you do when you're sober? You're sober with these decisions and you're still getting these kind of results. I was a little more harder on it than I should have been. So I was definitely at a fork in the road because that was supposed to send me back to jail. And I was like, I can't go back, but I didn't know how to go forward. So I was either going to go back to what I knew, and I just called my cousin, and I was like, get me to a meeting right now. And he came and got me, and he took me to Garden City to my home group, which now is my home group. And I went in, and it was all the heavy hitters of recovery, like all the people. My sponsor, Lisa, who did substance abuse in jail, was the first face I saw in the room when I got out. So, and then I was the guy on the couch. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I was to stay with Christ and just do the next right thing. And I'm still doing that in a lot of ways. I will say I've gotten 2 years of sobriety, as of yesterday. So I've got 2 years. And thank y'all. And I have found, because the third triangle AA is service, and I hadn't done the steps. I didn't feel like I had the right to. You can do more damage than good to somebody in recovery if you try to help them when you haven't gone through their steps. So I was like, I bet in the Bible, I was like, well, I can do service work for Jesus. You know what I mean? And I absolutely did, which is the first time when I saw Keith working for the Dive. Yeah.
It's a local ministry to the homeless, and if you want to know more about that, it's a great organization. Chris and I can share that with you. But yeah, go ahead.
But yeah, so I went to the Dive, and I'll never forget the first time that I connected with somebody, and I did so using my tragedy really in a way that others couldn't, and it clicked, and I was able to get them services, and we cried, and I was like, this is exactly what God was was calling me to do. I just knew in that moment that's what I was being called to do. And I continued doing that for about 6 months and just made sure that I was a good steward of the lives that came to me. And then I found myself, I was working at a restaurant simultaneously for my main income. And I'd get bottles of water and go out and up and down Broughton Street and sit down and talk to people and just find out how they got in their situation. I had no agenda. I just wanted to get to know them. So then it turned out that I was given a great opportunity. So I realized this is what I wanted to do. I went and got certified as a peer specialist, which we use our recovery, and we pretty much just present the case for which we are the evidence to prove that recovery and change is possible, and to inspire hope, and we advocate. We do all kinds of different things, but Georgia has really taken a strong hand with taking the approach to the CPS project, and the results speak for themselves, honestly. And I was planning on sitting on my certificates for a little while and probably being scared and stay at the restaurant, but the Homeless Authority actually came looking for me. So a month after I got certified, my counselor at Gateway said that she had recommended me for the position. And I called, and I had worked with Allie, my now supervisor, at the Dive too. She's like, yeah, I know, Chris. Everything just came. I just felt God's hands all over it. And I went and interviewed and sat down and had a wonderful talk. And just every day has just been, I was intimidated because everyone there has degrees and it was professional. And I was like, but they knew where I came from. So, it was like, and I never forgot the one who sent me to. I just knew that God brought me to it. Because, like I said, Matthew 7:7, like, knock on the door and it shall be opened. Well, he was opening it, but I was like, I don't want to go in there. I don't want to go in there. No, I'm good. I'm just going to sit back here. So I've become aware of the doors that are opening, and I walk through them, with a strong foundation in Christ now. And every day is just incredible with the Homeless Authority. Honestly, I get to go out and and reach myself. And I've kind of noticed, like, when we show up canvassing, they kind of want me to go talk to the people first, you know what I mean? And it's been incredible. And it's not heartbreaking. It can be heartbreaking too, because I see so much of myself in some of these people. And I also know that sometimes you're just planting seeds too, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not there to fix them. I'm there to just reach them first. They're humans first, you know what I mean? And even now, even doing this for a living, sometimes I still drive by people. I didn't notice them sitting there but it's been an incredible journey, and I can't wait to see where I go next with it, you know, but.
So Chris, if there was, one thing that stands out that you'd like people to come leave with, what would that be?
Yeah, definitely. When you see an individual, first of all, not everyone who's struggling is on the side of the road holding a sign. You know what I mean? There are a lot of folks that come in to us that are on the verge of losing everything. They're trying their best to keep everything together. Just, you never know. And there's more than just material poverty as well, too. So just when you look at somebody, look at them with your heart first before you look at them with your eyes. And try to see their heart before you see what you believe to be their circumstances. And you know what I mean? And you can't always go to them proclaiming Christ, because that's my hidden agenda, is to always, like, bring to them what Christ brought to me. You can't always do that right off the bat. So, it's like, just remember they're a human being first. Yeah.
Well, I mean,
I'm sorry, I know we're over our time. So
no.
I keep
So thank you for that, Chris. I think God is using your story, and I think that's just wonderful what you just said. And, there's an old saying, look beyond what you see and understand why. And sometimes it's easy for us to make judgments based on what we see, and we never understand why. And so, again, Chris, thank you for doing this. We really do.
Thank you.
So if you have any questions for Chris, or if this has touched your heart and you want to come and speak to him, he'll be down front. The prayer team will be here as well. We love the opportunity to pray for you. If this has stirred anything within you you want to talk further about, we'll be here. So as I close this in prayer, I also want to tell you that, again, feel free to sign up for the back to school drive in the back. And let me pray, and thank you for being here. God bless you. Father, your word says in Corinthians, it says that God is the God of all comfort, and he comforts us in all of our troubles so that we may be able to comfort others with the same comfort we have received. And boy, if ever there is an example of that verse in action, it's Chris's story. And so thank you for the courage that he had and the obedience to you, Father, that he's came up on this stage and shared his story. And I know it's life-changing for him, and I think for many who have heard his story. So I ask you blessings on him, Lord. I thank you for this time we have together, and we ask all this in Jesus' name.